seeking the welfare of multitudes, carried by mother's blessing, led by his master's hand, he crossed the far-ranging ocean, the smiles of destiny marking the way. A light from the east has dawned in the western lands. A light from
In the twilight of Thursday, February 22nd, 1900, Swami Vivekananda, after traveling a night and a day from Los Angeles, boarded a waiting ferry boat in Oakland for the 20-minute trip across the bay. As the boat neared the western shore, Swamiji, surely standing a while in the salty wind of the deck, looked for the first time upon the massed hills of San Francisco that rose, sprinkled now with lights, behind the tall gray stone tower of the new ferry building. Arriving at the wharf, he disembarked, passed with the tramping crowd through the ferry building, and emerged into the city. He had come north partly on the inspiration of Mrs. Hansborough, one of his hosts, helpers, and devotees from his Pasadena stay, who volunteered to be something like an advance agent for him, and he came partly also on the invitation of the Reverend B. Fay Mills to speak before a Congress of Religions in Oakland at the First Unitarian Church. But as always, he came with the idea of raising money for the work of the order in India, and to spread everywhere the seeds of the universal spiritual message of his master, Sri Ramakrishna. Swamiji stayed first at the Pine Street Home of Truth and gave his first San Francisco lecture the following day in Golden Gate Hall on the ideal of a universal religion. His second lecture 2 days later on Vedantism was delivered to a crowd of 2,000 people at the Oakland Unitarian Church. During the subsequent 3 months, he gave nearly 45 public lectures, throwing bombshells, as he put it, of Vedantic philosophy.
The Lord is all blissfulness. He is the reality behind all that exists. He is the goodness, the truth in everything. You are his incarnations. That is what is glorious. The nearer you are to him, the less you will have occasions to cry or weep. God is the infinite, impersonal being, ever-existent, unchanging, immortal, fearless, and you are all his incarnations, his embodiments. This is the God of Vedanta, and his heaven is everywhere.
Swamiji touched the lives of thousands of people through his public lectures in the halls of San Francisco, Oakland, and Alameda. The impact he had on his listeners was profound. He moved hearts, shook minds to their depths, and changed lives forever. Christine Albers recounts.
He began to speak, and there was a transformation. The soul force of the great man became visible. I felt the tremendous force of his speech, words that were felt more than they were heard. I was drawn into a sea of being, of feelings of a higher existence from which it seemed almost like pain to emerge when the lecture was finished. And then those eyes, how wonderful. They were like shooting stars, lights shooting forth from them in constant flashes. Over 30 years have elapsed since the day, but the memory of it is evergreen in my heart and will remain so.
From the audiences at his lectures, he gathered a following to whom he could give more serious training. So on March 9th, he took a flat on Turk Street for a month, where he could give classes and private interviews, and where he could, as he once wrote of the process,
mold disciples to conceive of the ideas of realization and perfect renunciation.
With these smaller groups and individuals, he, as the Guru, could be even more direct and full of love. By the time Swamiji moved to Alameda in April, a group of students from both sides of the bay were interested enough in Vedanta to want to form an organization which would continue to study even after he left. So on Saturday, April 14th, after one of his evening lectures in Redmond's Building, San Francisco, the Vedanta Society was formed for the dual purpose, as the first minutes read, of assisting Swami Vivekananda in his work in India and studying the Vedanta philosophy. Officers were elected, dues decided on, and meetings planned. The main occupation of the first meetings was the reading of Vedantic scriptures. These meetings were first held at Dr. Logan's offices at Market and Geary, later at his home at Oak and Steiner, and down through the years such meetings have continued unbroken to the present day. From Alameda, after giving nearly 60 lectures and classes, almost one per day, Swamiji, at the invitation of some students, went camping in Marin County for several weeks. With a small group, he meditated and taught, walked and rested there under the redwoods, and enjoyed himself immensely. Ida Ansel describes the never-to-be-forgotten first night at Camp Taylor on May 2nd.
I close my eyes and see him standing there in the soft blackness, with sparks from the blazing log fire flying through it and a day-old moon above. He was weary after a long lecture season, but relaxed and happy to be there. He said,
"We end life in the forest as we begin it, but with a world of experience between the two states."
Later, after a short talk, when we were about to have the usual meditation, he said,
"You may meditate on whatever you like, but I shall meditate on the heart of a lion. That gives strength."
The bliss and power and peace of the meditation that followed could never be described.
This camp is just a few miles from our Olima Vedanta retreat, where the spirit of Swamiji's meditations is still kept alive under the trees. Returning to San Francisco, he stayed with Dr. Logan and gave a few classes on the Bhagavad Gita for the newly formed Vedanta Society. On May 29th, at one of these last classes, he translated and commented on this well-known Gita verse as follows.
"He who sees in the midst of intense activity, intense calm, and in the midst of intensest peace is intensely active, is wise indeed." This is the question. With every sense and every organ active, have you that tremendous peace so that nothing can disturb you? Standing on Market Street, waiting for the car with all the rush going on around you, are you in meditation, calm and peaceful? In the cave, are you intensely active there, with all quiet about you? If you are a yogi.
In just 3 months, this great yogi, Swami Vivekananda, had brought the wonderful philosophy of Vedanta to Northern California, gathered a group of earnest seekers of truth, and established the Second Vedanta Society in the West. In 1899 and 1900, when Swamiji was in California, his brother disciples Swami Saradananda, Abhedananda, and Turiyananda were teaching Vedanta on the East Coast, with the New York Vedanta Society as the center. Miss Book, a Los Angeles devotee, observing some of the earnest young disciples of Swami Abhedananda, particularly the brahmachari Gurudasa, realized the need for a Vedanta retreat and gave Swamiji a piece of property in California for that purpose. When Swamiji came to New York, he asked Swami Turiyananda to go and take possession of the land, telling him that it was the Divine Mother's will that he should go there.
In Swami Turiyananda, you will see Vedanta personified. He lives it every moment of his life. He is the ideal Hindu monk, and he will help you all to live a pure and holy life.
Swami Turiyananda arrived in San Francisco on July 26, 1900, and after a week, he, with 12 Vedanta students and some supplies, set out for the land to fulfill Swamiji's command to hoist the flag of Vedanta there. He named the place Shanti Ashrama, or Peace Retreat, and 15 months of his stay in California he spent there teaching, meditating, chanting. When they arrived, however, they found themselves with only one log cabin, little water, 40 miles from the nearest source of supply, and under the scorching summer sun.
Mother, what have you done? What do you mean by this? These people will die, no shelter, no water. What shall they do?
The people, however, were of pioneer stock, and faced with a bare-bones pioneer situation, they set to work. During the next 2 years, they went about building canvas-walled buildings, a meditation cabin, a well for water, and, most importantly, building up their spiritual lives under the great Swami. He held classes daily on such subjects as the Bhagavad Gita, Viveka-Churamani, Swamiji's Raja Yoga, and his own vast knowledge of spiritual matters. He meditated with them 3 times a day. He did the physical work along with them. He chanted for them. He guided. He encouraged. Living with him was a constant inspiration to strive to realize God.
Be yourself and be strong. Remember that you are the Atman. That gives the greatest strength and courage. Be brave. Break through the bondage of Maya. Meditation is the key that opens the door to truth. Meditate, meditate. Meditate till light flashes into your mind and the Atman stands self-revealed.
The brahmachari Guru Dasa, who subsequently became Swami Atulananda and lived in India until his passing in 1966, was one of the most earnest students at the ashrama and later became its caretaker for many years. He writes of Swami Turiyananda and those early, inspiring days.
The Swami was in the prime of manhood, energetic and filled with enthusiasm. He gave himself heart and soul to his task. He never spared himself. He did not think of his own health or comforts. He had only one object, namely to bring these eager students to the feet of his divine master.
The work at Shanti Ashrama was focused on molding the spiritual lives of a few rather than broadcasting ideas before the general public. That Swami Turiyananda succeeded in this is evident, especially in the case of Guru Das. Leaving Los Angeles after a short trip there from the ashrama, the Swami told Sister Lalita,
If I have one man realizing God, I will be satisfied.
When Sister Lalita asked, Do you have such a man? Swami Turiyananda answered,
Yes, one.
The Swami did not neglect the Vedanta work in the cities, however, making several trips to the Bay Area from the ashrama. Frank Rodehamel, who along with his family became close devotees, recalled,
Upon his return each time, he held classes on the Gita and on meditation and delivered addresses in San Francisco, Oakland, and Alameda. These classes and lectures were exceptionally well attended. Though the Swami was not a lecturer in the popular sense of the word, he was a speaker of persuasive power, frequently rising to heights of impassioned utterance. He soon became known to a large circle of students, friends, and admirers.
The Swami would stay at Frank's home in East Oakland to give classes on Friday evenings and Saturday mornings. It was at smaller classes like these that he was at his best, meditating with the students, talking about practical spiritual life, and answering their questions. Even his simple presence in the home left a profound impression. The Berkeley Vedanta Society may trace its origin to this inspired beginning. The Swami worked untiringly for nearly 2 years in the Bay Area, establishing the fledgling Vedanta movement on a firm foundation. Unfortunately, his health broke down, and in June of 1902, Swami Vivekananda called him back to India. As he was departing Shanti Ashrama, Guru Das writes,
The Swami had taught us to make God realization the one aim of our life. He had shown us the way. It rested with us how far we would profit by his teaching. He said,
My work for the present is done. I have not left anything unfinished. Mother knows the rest. This ashrama is Mother's place. She has created this place for you all. Make the best use of it.
Before he passed away in July of 1902, Swami Vivekananda arranged for Swami Trigunatita, a brother disciple of Sri Ramakrishna, to come to San Francisco and continue the work left by Swami Turiyananda. The new leader of the Vedanta Society arrived via the Pacific the day after New Year's, 1903. After staying a few weeks with Dr. Logan, Swami Trigunatita moved to the home of Carl F. Peterson on Buchanan Street. The Peterson family, father, mother, and son, became great devotees of the Swami, serving him and the society for many years. Characteristically, as soon as he arrived, he set to work with a will. He felt that the main center of the society should be in the city rather than in the country. In the first 3 months, he gave lectures on Sunday afternoons in a rented hall downtown, and then classes and interviews at a Peterson's flat during the week. Before long, the flat became too small for the society's operations, and they all moved to another flat at 40 Steiner Street, the 2 front rooms of which became the society's auditorium. Within a year, the work was in full swing. Shanti Ashrama, however, was not neglected. In November 1903, Swami Trigunatita set out to the property with a group of serious students for the first of many annual month-long retreats. His style was much more organized than Swami Turiyananda's. The students were wakened daily at 3:45 a.m. and put through an intensive schedule of classes, meditation, and work until 10 p.m. The Swami himself cooked for them, and eating apart, he would read to them while they took their meals. The highlight of these retreats was the inspiring all-night Dhuni fire ceremony on the top of one of the hills overlooking the valley. In later years, many improvements in the facilities were made with the untiring labor of the Swami, the monks, and the devotees. In 1904, the Swami and a committee of members began planning a new temple, a home of the society's own. They roamed all over the city looking for a site suitable but within the society's capacity to buy. They found one near the bay on Webster Street among sand lots for $1,800. Having secured the lot, they began collecting funds to start the building. The cornerstone of this temple, to quote a pamphlet the Swami printed, was laid by the San Francisco Vedanta Society on 21st August 1905 for the good of humanity. In a little more than 4 months, the basic building was up, finished, and ready for the dedication, which took place on January 7th, 1906. The temple was proudly proclaimed the first Hindu temple in the whole Western world, and dedicated to the cause of humanity. With regard to the future of the temple, Swami Trigunatita said,
"I shall not live to enjoy. Others will come later who will enjoy. Believe me, if there is the least tinge of selfishness in building this temple, it will fall. But if it is the Master's work, it will stand."
Hardly were the first 2 stories of the temple finished when the Swami conceived the idea of adding the 3rd floor and towers so that Swami Brahmananda, the head of the Ramakrishna Math and Mission, could come and lead the American work. Within a year, the project materialized. The Swami published a pamphlet explaining each tower and detail of the structure.
This temple may be considered as a combination of a Hindu temple, a Christian church, a Mohammedan mosque, a Hindu math or monastery, and an American residence.
The rededication ceremonies took place on April 5, 1908. When Swami Brahmananda sent word that he could not leave the work in India to come to live there, the Swami was disappointed. But he decided that founding a monastery was a fitting substitute, and gradually he added qualified men until he had a total of about 10. The convent he established across from the temple lasted only a few years, though the seeds were planted for a future harvest. Every year, Christmas and Sri Ramakrishna's birthday were celebrated with equal éclat. The auditorium was beautifully decorated, and a 15-hour continuous service was held. A program of lectures interspersed with meditation, music, and readings from the Gospels began at 6 a.m. and continued without a break until 9 p.m. Members spoke with pride of how the Swami never left his standing position on the platform for the entire 15 hours. And what is more, many of the students did not leave their seats in the auditorium, fasting the entire day. Swami Trigunatita was a man of strong discipline in regard to spiritual life, both for himself and for his students. Consequences never deterred him. To the genuine disciple he would say,
I don't mind if I break every bone in your body so that I can drag you up to the shores of the ocean of immortality and throw you in. Then my work will be finished.
Yet he was extremely loving and tender.
Keep on having patience. Never be impatient with the mind. When it wanders, bring it back patiently, again and again if need be, but always patiently. When you crave blessings, or whatever you ask from the Divine Mother, or whatever you need in life, be prepared and willing to wait, for years if necessary. Learn how to wait. Let her will be done, even if you wait forever. Rest assured that Mother knows what is best for her children.
The Swami had large ideas not only for his students but for the development of the Vedanta movement, which he believed would bring liberation to all mankind. He believed America had an important part to play in the new movement, and he was doing his utmost to make this possible. One example of this was the colony in Concord, California. The Society purchased 200 acres of land there, 25 acres of which was to be the temple area, and the rest was to be owned by members. According to the plan for future development, there would eventually be a temple, a library, an orphan's home, a hospital, and a home for the aged, all run by the members. Some dwellings were indeed built, land cultivated, and a caretaker maintained to keep it up. Every Saturday the Swami would go there and give a class and generally watch out for its welfare. Though it showed great promise, it had to be sold after the Swami's death. These institutions that he planned show the dimensions of the Swami's mind and heart, and although they may have failed in his time, possibly they are token payments on great things to come. A printing establishment was set up in the temple. Its most important production was the magazine called The Voice of Freedom, which came out for 7 years, from 1909 to 1916. Toward the end of his life, the Swami was beset with painful physical troubles, yet he continued to pour himself heart and soul into the work of the temple. It was at this time that Swami Trigunatita's life tragically came to a close. He was injured in an explosion which occurred in the auditorium on December 27, 1914, and he gave up his body on Swamiji's birthday, January 10, 1915, ending a life of dedication and service that put the young Vedanta Society on a firm foundation for the future. In December 1915, Belur Math directed Swami Prakashananda to take over the leadership of the Vedanta Society, which he held until his death in 1927. A gracious and affectionate person, he was a specialist in Sanskrit literature and chanting. Serving under Swami Trigunatita as assistant from his arrival in August 1906, he had helped the society grow in its most formative years. He wrote for the magazine, managed the monastery, and gave many of the weekly classes and lectures. It was at his suggestion that Swami Trigunatita had taught Western students to lecture, so that the work might continue even without an Indian Swami. And when he visited India in 1923, American students so trained kept the services going. One of the monastery members writes of him during his years as assistant,
"The young men came to deeply love Swami Prakashananda for his unfailing cheerfulness under all circumstances and for his spotless purity of mind. They found him to be a true representative of the Divine Mother, his gentle, loving disposition winning every heart. He entered into all their trials and problems and was one of them."
As Swami in charge, he retained as many of the innovations of his predecessor as he could. Lectures, classes, celebrations, retreats, and individual training of students went on with his loving and quiet guidance. Swami Prakashananda continued the Society's tradition of visiting the Shanti Ashrama for intensive retreats. In 1922, Mrs. Petit wrote about that year's program.
More than 20 students eagerly availed themselves of the summer meditation classes at the Shanti Ashrama during the month of June under the direct guidance of Swami Prakashananda. We had 3 meditations each day in the center of the ashrama compound under the cool shade of a spreading oak tree, which bore on its huge trunk the symbols of Om and Shiva. The all-night Duni service, which came off on June 14th, was a great success. All those privileged to be present on the occasion were blessed with inspiration and upliftment. Sanskrit names were given to many new members, and all made offerings in the sacred fire. Then came sunrise, and the almost tangible bliss of a night spent in devotion fades to a memory, but a memory that will ever remain in the hearts of most of us as a great event in our spiritual ongoing.
After his visit to India, Swami Prakashananda led the Society for 4 more years, until he succumbed to diabetes in 1927. In the years towards the end of his life and following his passing, several other Swamis taught in the Society. One was Swami Prabhavananda, who later worked in Portland and then founded the Vedanta Society of Southern California. There was also Swami Vivedishananda, who led groups of devotees for a time in both Washington, D.C. and Denver, and eventually founded the Vedanta Society in Seattle. Another was Swami Dayananda, who persuaded some American nurses to come to India and help him found a hospital in Calcutta. Another leader of this society was Swami Madhavananda, who was later asked to return to India to become one of the administrators of the order, and ultimately also to become its president. Finally, Swami Ashokananda arrived on July 4, 1931, served as an assistant to Swami Vivedishananda for a year, and took charge in 1932. During the 4 decades of Swami Ashokananda's leadership, the Society underwent a period of steady growth. In 1931, however, it, like the country at the beginning of the Great Depression, had hit something of a slump. The temple was old-fashioned and in disrepair, and its membership had decreased. So after his arrival, the Swami began to give many lectures in downtown halls, both in San Francisco and the East Bay, in order to acquaint larger groups of educated people with Vedanta. Swami Ashokananda's lectures in places like the Century Club were very powerful, and attracted a new group of people to ask for interviews and come to the temple. Some of them, like Alfred Clifton, who joined the monastery and accompanied the Swami to India in 1934, and Edith Soule, later the Society's dynamic secretary, became pillars of the Society for decades to come. Throughout the 30s, the Swami gave midweek lectures and classes in the temple. He and some members searched the Bay Area bookstores to build up a fine library of rare books for the Society. At this time also, a number of excellent musicians joined the Society, such as Dora Blaney and Carol Weston, along with Mrs. Soule. For years they performed and even composed music for the services, some of which is still used today. The growing attendance at the temple caused Swami Ashokananda to think about a larger facility. Yet, would a new building ever have such a powerful divine presence? He wrote to Swami Shivananda, the president of the order, and received a letter saying that the presence of Sri Ramakrishna would be even more manifest in a new temple, and that Swami Trigunatita also would bless the move. So the Swami felt that when the building was financially possible, they could begin. And in September 1941, a lot at Vallejo and Fillmore was purchased. The United States' entry into the World War 3 months later, however, put off all thought of construction for another 10 years. Meanwhile, East Bay Vedantins, who had continued to meet since Swami Turiyananda's day, were much inspired by Swami Ashokananda's lectures, and two of them, the Fox sisters, offered a large amount of money to help finance a temple in Berkeley. Despite some rather harsh opposition from worried neighbors, the temple took shape on a lot 3 blocks from the University of California, the Swami watching with great interest the many details of its construction. The new temple was finally dedicated during the Durga Puja festival, October 20th through 22nd, 1939, with many Swamis and devotees taking part. Sarah Fox became the first president. Also, during the latter part of the 30s, the Society created a summer retreat at Lake Tahoe, where Swamis and students could go to relax and practice meditation free from the tensions of the city during the summer months. At first, they bought a cabin at Myers, a short distance from the south end of the lake. Later, a larger, more beautiful piece of land overlooking the lake was purchased, and 2 students donated funds for a cabin for the Swamis, which was built and dedicated in 1938. Over the years, many Swamis have enjoyed retreats there. Aside from the usual routine of lectures, classes, private interviews, and special celebrations that have characterized the Society's work from the beginning, several new programs were started in the 40s. A Sunday school began in 1941 and continued until 1969, teaching basic Vedanta to several generations of youngsters. Sanskrit language classes in both Berkeley and San Francisco were started, as was a magazine called The Voice of India, containing articles by Swamis and devotees, which was published until 1946. In the late 40s, a group of people in Sacramento interested in universal philosophy began attending Swami Ashokananda's San Francisco lectures and classes. They urged him to start a center there, so he began traveling to Sacramento to look for property and to give a class in a devotee's home. 7 acres outside the city were bought, and soon part of the future temple was erected to house a small chapel and monastery, which was dedicated on March 8, 1953. Another important project of the 40s was the search for a year-round retreat for members, preferably within a short drive from the city. The Swami and members investigated the countryside all around the Bay Area, particularly in Marin County, where Swami Vivekananda had spent several weeks in 1900. In June 1946, they found 2,100 acres of forest and meadowland for sale at Olima in West Marin. The Swami discussed it with members and did a good deal of prayerful thinking before the Society undertook to buy it, as it meant further delay of the construction of the new temple, which by then had become a serious need. Fortunately, they decided to buy. The Vedanta retreat was dedicated on July 26, 1946. Enthusiastic plans for its future development included a temple to Sri Ramakrishna, a retreat house for men, a retreat house for women, a monastery, a convent, a home for aged devotees, and a university. At least once a week, Swami Ashokananda drove to Olima to walk over the property and attend to the monastery that was housed in a large barn there, and to supervise the various projects. From the beginning, crews of women workers from the East Bay and San Francisco came to participate in such activities as field work and weed control. In February 1948, Swami Shanta Swarupananda arrived from India to assist in the Society's expanding work. He was of immense help, particularly in taking over the Berkeley ministry. His quiet work had a deep influence on those who came there. In San Francisco, the planning and construction of the new temple took the best of the Society's resources during the 50s. Swami Ashokananda watched every step of the construction of the building, a good deal of which he designed himself, especially after the Society's chief architect died during the planning period. His untiring assistant on the job was Mr. Clifton, now known as Bhrigu Chaitanya. The current structure was conceived as only part one of 3 stages in its ultimate development, which would house many future activities of San Francisco Vedantins, so the foundation was made very solid. The dedication of the new temple, which took place during Durga Puja of 1959, was a grand affair. Many Swamis from all over America participated in the week-long worship of the Divine Mother, Sri Ramakrishna, and other deities. 3 fire ceremonies were performed, at one of which, held at midnight, several of the monks took first monastic vows. About 300 members and friends of the Society attended the final lectures given by the Swamis.
And now, friends, it is my duty and my privilege to declare this temple open to all earnest seekers of truth.
In April 1957, Swami Shraddhananda came to assist with the ever-expanding work in San Francisco, Colima, and Sacramento, the last of which became his special province. For years, he traveled from one of these centers to another every week, giving classes, helping in the work, and inspiring the devotees and monastic members. Following the new temple dedication, the Society turned again to the Sacramento work. The special feature of this temple was that most of the construction from foundation to rooftop was done by members. Many years of long, hard labor on the part of the San Francisco and Sacramento members went into the finished temple, which was dedicated in November 1964. In 1961, Mr. Alfred T. Clifton, president of the Society and many years a monk, went to Belur Math, India to take sannyasa, becoming Swami Chidrupananda. In the early 60s, Swami Ashokananda, after much correspondence with Belur Math, secured permission to make the previously established convent part of the Ramakrishna order. 4 women took first vows in November of 1961. The convent was located in a house purchased in 1952 adjoining the new temple lot, and in 1969 it was moved to a larger building down the street. A house donated by 2 members in San Rafael became another convent across the bay. During the late 60s, Swami Ashokananda's health deteriorated, though he continued to manage the work and to get the Society's house in order for his successor. Another assistant was required, and in August 1968, Swami Swahananda came to help with the lecturing and other work. Swami Ashokananda passed away on December 13, 1969, after nearly 4 decades of dedicated service of God in man. Always an eloquent speaker, he gave many inspired and practical lectures, some of which have been published in book form by the Society subsequently. Aside from the expansion of buildings and facilities, the Swami's enduring legacy was his affectionate and painstaking training of individual spiritual aspirants, probably the heart of all Vedanta Society work. When Swami Shanta Swarupananda took over the leadership of the Society for the year following Swami Ashokananda's death in 1969, his main task was the division of the Society into 3 parts, so that each could grow independently. This was accomplished smoothly, with Sacramento coming under Swami Shraddhananda's leadership, Berkeley in Swami Swahananda's care, and San Francisco under the new Swami, Swami Prabodhananda, who arrived on June 25, 1970. Swami Shantasvarupananda took several months to acquaint Swami Prabodhananda with his responsibilities before leaving for India for health reasons in December 1970. In the early 70s, the Society's attention focused on Olima. Over the decades since the retreat was purchased in 1946, many projects were undertaken, such as removal of old structures, the building of the women's shed, the conversion of the barn into living and working quarters, development of roads and water systems, and creating the Camellia Garden. However, there were no proper facilities for devotees and guests to stay and use the property as a retreat. So, with the groundbreaking ceremony of April 1971, work began first on a fine building for women, designed from the ground up by an architect to function as a retreat house. It was dedicated on May 28, 1972, with 7 visiting swamis taking part. In 1973, the old Shafter Manor near the barn, dating from the 1860s, was purchased, along with some surrounding property. After extensive renovations by the brothers, the men's retreat house was made ready and dedicated on November 15, 1975. In that same year, the Rift Zone Trail along the eastern boundary was made available to the general public as a result of a legal struggle over taxation with Marin County. This inspired a new idea about the purpose of the retreat, that the facilities should be opened and made available to all truth seekers. Starting in a small way, this effort has been a great success during the past 25 years, with thousands of people of every imaginable religious persuasion coming and spending some time in spiritual practice on the property. As a further development of this idea, in the mid-1970s the Society began hosting an annual open house program on Memorial Day. Inviting a speaker from another religious tradition, the day is spent in talks, discussions, music, meditation, and the feeding of all attendees. Beginning with a few hundred people and a small rented tent, the program has grown to large proportions, sometimes with over 1,000 participants. An integral part of the Society's work over the years has been the training of monks and nuns. In 1973, 3 Northern California brahmacharis went to India to take the final vows of sannyasa. On July 4, 1974, 3 nuns took final vows in San Francisco. In 1978, an outreach effort was begun in which libraries were offered a selection of book titles. This book gift project soon expanded to include all California libraries, then all West Coast libraries, and ultimately libraries throughout the United States and Canada. Since the program's inception, over 1,000 libraries have accepted books from the Society. As part of the Society's 75th anniversary, a one-day pilgrimage was made to Shanti Ashrama, with many swamis and devotees attending. 5 years later, in 1980, 4 monks spent a month at the ashrama renovating the historical meditation cabin, the first permanent structure built for teaching Vedanta in the Western world. Since then, the Society has continued visiting the ashrama in the spring for a gathering that attracts about 150 people to taste of its peaceful atmosphere. At Olima, in May 1980, a fruit orchard was planted and dedicated. The trees, being well tended by the women workers, now produce about 4 tons of fruit yearly. This fruit is used for public celebrations and also given to devotees. On January 4, 1982, 11 inches of rain fell in 24 hours at the retreat. The storm caused extensive damage throughout West Marin. Before repairing our own roads and culverts, the monks took dump trucks and a loader to the nearby town of Inverness and spent several days helping neighbors dig out and haul away many cubic yards of mud. This flood ultimately led to the replacement in 1992 of the retreat's entrance bridge with a much sturdier concrete structure. Swami Shraddhananda dedicated this Vivekananda bridge with a worship of the Universal Spirit. In 1982, the Society's Marie-Louise Burke, also known as Sister Gargi, was presented with the Vivekananda Award by the President of the Ramakrishna Order for her monumental research work on Swami Vivekananda. Her effort, spanning many decades, has resulted in the publication of a 6-volume series of books entitled Swami Vivekananda in the West, New Discoveries, adding immensely to our knowledge of the great Swami's life and teachings. In celebration of the 150th anniversary of Sri Ramakrishna's birth, Guru Purnima was observed in a special way in July 1987. 12 of the nuns took monastic vows, 8 of them the final vows of sannyasa, and 4 of them the first vows of brahmacharya. The giving of vows, as one of the Swamis remarked, is the greatest service the Vedanta Society, as part of the Ramakrishna Order, can offer. A special music cantata was also presented by the women's choir. 1993 was an active year for the Society, being the 100th anniversary of Swami Vivekananda's arrival in the United States. One of the monks went to India for sannyasa vows, and 3 nuns received final vows in the temple. The Sunday School launched an annual youth retreat for graduates in Olima. On September 11th, a musical offering on the life of Swami Vivekananda was performed. On the next day, there was a groundbreaking ceremony for the new addition to the temple, with Swami Gahanananda, Vice President of the Order, officiating. In 1994, the Society commemorated Swami Vivekananda's 2-week stay in 1900 at Camp Irving in Taylor Park. The construction of the new temple addition fully occupied the Society for the next 2 years. Restricted by building codes and height limitations, the addition was built in the garden behind the temple rather than on top of the auditorium as originally planned in the 1950s. Fulfilling many long-felt needs, the new building would provide every department of the Society with more space and facilities. The dedication of the addition took place over New Year's weekend in 1995-96. Special music programs, worships, talks, and a fire ceremony inaugurated the new Swami Vivekananda Centenary Hall. Many Swamis, nuns, and devotees from other centers joined in the festivities. Two senior monks passed away at that time. Swami Sahajananda, who had been a pillar of the retreat since the early 50s, and who had sent many crates of medical and dental supplies to India over the years, and Swami Chidrupananda, who had quietly made possible so many of the Society's projects since he joined in the 1930s. On Easter Sunday of 1996, the new Sri Sarada Library on the top floor of the Vivekananda Hall was finally dedicated. The library, which had been like an orphan for many years, moving from one room to another, now had a permanent home. Like the library, the Society's bookshop also gained upgraded facilities as a result of the new construction. Starting with just a few shelves in the auditorium lobby, it has grown dramatically since the 1970s and is now a vital part of the work of the center. In 1999, a new event for young people was added to the Memorial Day retreat at Olima. Called the Youth Forum on Universal Spiritual Values, It welcomes students and young adults from all over the Bay Area to spend a day together in talks, discussion, and workshops on religious and moral issues. Still in its infancy, the program holds much promise for the future. The Society celebrated its centenary in 2000-2001 with a year-long series of special events. It began with the inaugural lighting of a flame by Swami Smaranananda, General Secretary of the Ramakrishna Order, and talks by the Swami and Sister Gargi on April 14, 2000. The centenary continued with special programs at both Shanti Ashrama in April and at the Olima Retreat on Memorial Day, in which speakers from 5 religions participated. Many Swamis were invited for the Guru Purnima celebration in July at the new temple, during a part of which 3 of the convent's nuns received final vows. New Year's Day 2001 saw the opening of an exhibit in the new temple library of many historical items from the Society's archives. The grand finale of the centenary took place at the Palace of Fine Arts Theatre in San Francisco with a concert of Indian classical music by Ustad Ali Akbar Khan playing sarod and Pandit Sopan Chowdhury on tabla. Also featured were talks by Daniel Gomez Ibanez, organizer of the 1993 Parliament of the World's Religions, and Swami Adishwarananda of New York. More than the special events, however, the essence of the centenary year was the celebration of 100 years of the Society's unbroken service to God in man. Ranging from public lectures, worships and classes, to individual spiritual instruction, from quiet meditation in the solitude of the retreat, to the hard work of constant maintenance of the Society's facilities, from literary and musical efforts to sending aid to India, from supporting and encouraging an active monastic community to the caring of guests from all over the world. The Society continues to wholeheartedly attempt to live up to the lofty ideals of its founder, Swami Vivekananda. Inspired by its guides, Sri Ramakrishna, the Holy Mother Sri Sarada Devi, and Swami Vivekananda, may it continue to flourish, bringing the message of Vedanta to the Bay Area and beyond.